A 23-year-old woman stood in front of a mirror and practiced looking insane. She widened her eyes. She let her hair fall loose and wild. She rehearsed a blank, distant stare until it felt real. Within days, she would walk willingly into one of the most feared buildings in America, a place where women disappeared and were never seen again. She had a plan to get in. She had no plan to guarantee she'd get out. Her name was Nellie Bly, and what she was about to do had never been attempted by a journalist before. New York City in 1887 was a place of dazzling wealth and brutal poverty, sitting side by side on the same streets. Fortunes were being built in marble mansions, while just blocks away, immigrants and the poor crowded into filthy tenements. In this city, if a woman was deemed inconvenient, hysterical, foreign, or simply unwanted, she could be sent away with frightening ease. All it took was one doctor's signature, and once that door closed behind her, there was often no way back. The place where these women vanished sat quietly in the East River, close enough to see the city skyline, far enough to be forgotten. Blackwell's Island. Rumors about it traveled through the city like smoke. People whispered about screaming heard across the water at night. They spoke of women locked away not because they were sick, but because they were inconvenient to someone with power. Nobody outside those walls knew for certain what happened inside. That silence was exactly what protected it. Nellie Bly was a young reporter at the New York World, hungry to prove herself in a newspaper industry that rarely gave women serious assignments. Her editor gave her a challenge that sounded almost impossible. Get committed to Blackwell's Island Asylum, live among the patients, find out what was truly happening behind those walls, and then find a way out to tell the world. Most reporters would have refused. Nellie Bly said yes. She spent days perfecting her performance. She checked into a boarding house for working women under false name and began acting strange, staring blankly at walls, refusing to sleep, insisting to terrified housemates that she couldn't remember her own past. It worked with terrifying speed. Within hours, police were called. She was brought before a judge, and then paraded in front of a series of doctors, men who were supposed to be experts in identifying insanity. Not one of them caught her. One doctor examined her for only a few minutes before declaring her a hopeless case. Another barely looked up from his notes. In under a day, an intelligent, sane young woman had convinced trained medical professionals that she belonged in a mental asylum, and that alone revealed something deeply broken in the system meant to protect the vulnerable. Then came the boat ride across the East River, and with it, her final chance to turn back. She didn't take it. The moment she stepped through the asylum doors, the temperature seemed to drop. The first thing that struck her was the smell, filthy, damp, and old, as if the walls themselves had absorbed years of suffering. Women lined the hallways, some rocking silently, some crying without explanation, some simply staring at nothing. Nellie quickly realized a horrifying truth. Not all of them were mentally ill. Some were immigrants who couldn't speak English and were labeled insane simply because no one could understand them. Others were poor women who had nowhere else to go. A shocking number of them, she would come to believe, were as sane as she was. The daily routine was designed less to heal and more to break a person completely. Meals were often barely edible, spoiled meat, stale bread and water that sometimes carried a strange, off-color no one dared question. Patients were forced to sit silently for hours on hard benches, with nothing to occupy their minds, no books, no conversation, no purpose. For a bath, women were plunged into freezing water, sometimes several patients scrubbed with the exact same rag before being shoved out shivering into the cold. Some nurses treated the women with open cruelty, mocking their distress, tightening restraints harder than necessary, and punishing anyone who dared to complain. And here was the cruelest twist of all. The more a woman protested that she felt fine, that she didn't belong there, that she deserved to go home, the more the staff took it as confirmation of madness. Sanity itself became a trap with no visible exit. Nellie watched, listened, and quietly memorized every detail. She had no notebook. Keeping one would have exposed her instantly. So she stored it all in her memory, the names of patients, the specific cruelties of certain nurses, the way one attendant would twist a woman's arm simply because she cried too loudly at night. She held on to every fragment of horror, turning her own mind into the only evidence she could carry out of that place. 10 days passed inside those walls. 10 days of freezing water, spoiled food, and endless, aching boredom that pressed down on the mind like a physical weight. Then, exactly as arranged in advance, lawyers sent by her newspaper arrived to secure her release. Stepping back onto solid ground in Manhattan, Nellie Bly could have simply walked away and moved on with her life. Instead, she sat down and wrote everything, every detail, every name, every act of cruelty she had witnessed. The result was a newspaper exposé so shocking it practically detonated across the city. Later published as a book titled 10 Days in a Mad House, New Yorkers were horrified. This wasn't some distant tragedy in a place they'd never see. Blackwell's Island sat directly within view of their own city, and inside it, women exactly like their sisters, daughters, and neighbors had been quietly discarded and forgotten. The public outcry grew too loud for authorities to ignore. A grand jury investigation was launched. Officials were forced to personally tour the asylum, this time with reporters watching their every move. Reforms followed. New York City increased funding for the care of the mentally ill. Oversight of asylums tightened considerably. Wrongful commitments became far harder to carry out in secret. It wasn't a perfect fix, and the road to truly humane treatment for the mentally ill would stretch on for decades to come. But a locked door that had once seemed impossible to open had finally been forced ajar, and light was pouring in. Nellie Bly could have written a safe story from a comfortable distance. Instead, she walked into a building people feared to even speak about, allowed herself to be labeled insane, and endured 10 days most people wouldn't survive with their sanity intact. She did it so that other women wouldn't be silenced and forgotten inside those walls. Her 10 days changed the entire course of American journalism, and gave a voice to women who had been told, again and again, that no one would ever listen. It's a stark reminder that sometimes the only way to reveal a hidden horror is to willingly step directly inside it. If you want more forgotten true stories like this one, stories the history books tend to leave out, subscribe for more, because history has far darker corners than most people ever realize.